is about writing good software. Not necessarily everyone here will be using R code to create software, but a lot of the same aspects that goes into creating apps and in software is going to be the same thing that us as analysts or those who are using R to convert data or whatever you're going to use R for. It can help you to keep things organized and make it easier for anyone else on your team who might be using the data that you're creating, the visualizations that you're creating, etc. All right. So it's really recommended, and I believe you did this in like the first day, to have some organization for your projects. So as you had a chance to try out, I believe, you were able to create an R project. And from that, you can create organizations such as a folder to store your data or your scripts or any type of output that you like. That's important because down the line, sometimes even the next week, it can be confusing where things are. And it's a lot easier to identify where they are when it's nicely organized within your overall project. You might consider using something called Project Template. It's going to be something that kind of helps get you started. It might be a little bit more than you need to do, but it might be a bit interesting to see what are some of the different types of structure that you can have to organize a project. And that's going to be from the it's called Project Template. Likely you don't already have it installed, so you can install it like this. Okay, Project Template. And in Project Template, we'll first go ahead and install it. And then we'll load it using the library. Okay. What we can do is we can create a blank project template. And that's handy because it can keep things very similar between projects that you might be doing. So maybe today I call this script. So when I make a new project, I call it code. Maybe some little difference in consistency like that can make things confusing. So by using a standardized template, it could be useful for your situation. Well, let's try creating a new project. Okay. Make some space. And where do you want to put it? This is going to be the file path that you want to put this. So maybe I want to call this my project. Put this in quotes. Okay. If I do this, it's going to create it directly in my the current folder that I'm at. If you want to put it somewhere else, for example, I want to go and put this in a folder above my current folder, you can do this, .. means go back a directory. So go up a directory and then create this folder. So it's up to you where you want to put it. And then after that, you can add this, which may not be too important now, but this is going to be the merge. Sorry, I lost that. The merge strategy, you can already see in the help what that's going to do. So for example, if you are trying to create this in a directory that already exists, is it going to allow it, or will only allow when that folder is completely empty? I'm going to allow it if the folder already exists. So that's going to be what it looks like if you want that option. Okay. So try running that. And if you know exactly where you want to put it, then you can alter the path to go there. For example, if I take this out, it's just going to create it in my current directory now. All right, you saw my project. So this is if you had a new project. And if I open it, look what's in it. wow, where did all this come from? So like I mentioned, this is a way to have a standardized project template where now every time you create a new project, you're going to have consistent places to store your data, to store any reports that you have, any type of testing that you're doing on your functions or your coding, you can save that somewhere. Likely this is more than what you need, so it's up to you. You can delete some of the folders that you're not going to use. You'll notice that there's a bunch of markdown files. If you open them, you can see that they really recommend having you put some description of what your project's about, helping you to be more organized and have documentation, especially for projects that are going to last quite a bit. You're going to make sure that new members down the line will understand what was done in the past, and they can continue on and pick up relatively quickly. Okay, so this is one method that you can use to go ahead and create this directory template. If you like it, of course, then you can use it. You can also link it to your GitHub so that this is all on your GitHub page. And that way everyone in your project can access it. So however method you choose, whether that's creating manual folders for your situation, it's a really good idea to have this kind of organization. Okay. And along with that, there's going to be some tips that are recommended when you're doing coding in R and even in any coding. For example, you want to make sure that what you're doing is readable and understandable. So I know we kind of mentioned things like base R versus like tidyverse method. So one reason people like to stick to tidyverse is it's often a bit more readable. It might be a bit more long, right? Because look how long this code is. But it might be a bit more clear to someone down the line looking at it. So it's up to you what you prefer to use. You can also, of course, make things more readable through simple things like spacing. So you'll notice that I tried to include different parts of the code on different lines, trying to avoid this too much where it goes off on a page. That can be a little bit hard to read. So even though the code's exactly the same, some things that you can do to make the code more readable will be beneficial for someone else and even yourself. Like in the future, you're trying to understand something. Another thing is that as you're adding documentation, you want to focus more on what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. If I focus more on how something is working, then someone may not grasp like what is going to be the problem that you're trying to solve in this code. So for example, like if I'm telling you how this is working, I know we went over that today because that was the purpose of the workshop, to kind of understand how it works. But for someone who wants to know what's going on, if you say column 1 and column 2 combine to form a single column with values separated by a plus sign, it's like, what is the point? Why are we doing this? Instead of saying maybe in the front that we need to combine data into a single column so that it will work for this analysis, right? So the why, what you're trying to do, why. And that's important because maybe someone down the line might think of a better way of doing something. So when they understand what you're trying to do, they can edit the code and then make your project even more efficient. Okay. Another thing is that try your best to keep things in modules. So meaning things that are related to each other should be grouped accordingly. So if you have scripts that you're writing that are solely focused for maybe importing data, and then some that are doing things like feature engineering, so like you're editing some of the columns, you might want to store those separately from files or scripts that are going to be focused on the actual analysis or creating some visualizations. That's nice because it can make it so it's less cluttered. You can imagine that if I have everything from importing the data to cleaning the data to like reshaping the data using like pivot wider, then the analysis, then the visualizations, all in one script, we're going to have like 1,000 lines pretty easily. And it's going to be kind of hard to navigate through that. You can always reference different functions that you create using the source function. I believe you might have looked at that in like day 1 or day 2. So there's ways that you can have your code separated and still nicely organized. Next is when you're trying to do something, it's hard to look at this thing and then maybe start with this as a solution. It's better to break into pieces. So you'll notice that there were some iterations of this code, meaning when we tried it, we only united one thing. And then I checked, did it work? Okay, great, keep going. Did it work? Okay, great, keep going. So when you get your project, you're gonna have different problems that you're trying to solve. Approaching them in like a piecewise method is gonna be a bit easier than trying to think of all the different things you're trying to do and then just kind of go at all the different issues at the same time. Try to separate the issues into small pieces. So like, for example, first, before I want to make this data visualization, think about what kind of data does it need? So figure that out. Next. How do I do it? Okay, do that next. So make basically like a checklist for every problem that you're trying to have, making that into bite-sized pieces. Testing out your functions, very important. That was why, although it seemed pretty annoying in this session, when we're using things like the head function and the str structure function again and again, using things like all.equal, making sure, is it the same? Is it what we intended it to be? Going back to when you were learning functions and then you're doing internal checks to make sure, is this going to be like character data type, what I want it to be? It's very important because that can prevent a lot of the errors that can happen down the line. And when someone is trying to run your scripts, think about a project that's been going on for like a year, having run everything and then it says there's an error, it can be pretty daunting to figure out why is this happening? Where is it? When that could have been prevented through some error checking within the code. Okay. Also, we try to eliminate redundancy when coding. You'll remember that in one example when making that PDF, right? I could have literally copied this and pasted it twice and then edit a little bit, but that's going to make the length of the code so much longer, so much harder to read. Trying to make it so a bit more modular. So for example, I was able to reuse this object. So I was able to save it as something and then redo it with a small modification. That can really help to improve the look of the project and make it easier to troubleshoot in the future. Okay, so those kinds of consistencies are going to be useful too. It will really make projects go smoother down the line, and you'll have a lot more fun out of the work that you do rather than spend all the time troubleshooting some errors.